Imagine your entire life, your freedom, your reputation, your very existence, hanging on a 15.5-inch piece of duct tape.
Yeah, and not just right after it happened, but like more than 20 years after the crime was actually committed.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today we are looking at this tiny piece of tape that was found folded over on Laci Peterson's maternity pants during her autopsy back in 2003.
Which is now suddenly the absolute focal point of the Los Angeles Innocence Project in 2024.
It's just wild. So, we were unpacking the 2002 disappearance and murder of Laci Peterson and her unborn son, Connor.
And we've got a massive stack of sources for this.
Oh, yeah, we do. We're pulling from breaking courtroom updates from CBS News, exhaustive historical records, minute-by-minute timeline analyses, and some really cool recent on-the-ground geographical studies of Modesto and the San Francisco Bay.
Because the goal here isn't just to retell a famous true crime story. I mean, most people know the basics.
Right, you've probably heard the names. But our mission today is to really understand the mechanics of circumstantial evidence and, look at the grueling architecture of the criminal appeals process.
Yeah, and how advanced touch DNA technology can just suddenly breathe life back into a case that everyone, I mean, literally the whole public, considered permanently closed.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. To comprehend why a judge in San Mateo County is agonizing over a piece of duct tape today, we really have to rewind to December 2002.
We have to establish that baseline because you have Laci and Scott Peterson living in Modesto, California, and they look like the perfect couple.
Totally. The media coverage at the time heavily emphasized this. I mean, Laci grew up on a dairy farm. She was a cheerleader, majored in ornamental horticulture at Cal Poly, just super family-oriented.
Then Scott, well, he grew up in San Diego. He was a former junior golf champion.
Wait, didn't he play with Phil Mickelson?
Yeah, actually played alongside Phil Mickelson in high school, and he ended up majoring in agricultural business.
So they meet in 1994. They get married. They open a sports bar called The Shack, sell it, and then move to an upscale Modesto neighborhood.
Right. And by late 2002, Scott has a good job at the fertilizer company, and Laci is 8 months pregnant.
With a boy they were going to name Connor, due in February 2003. So why is this picture-perfect background so important to the legal case?
Well, establishing that baseline is standard, but in high-profile cases, it gets weaponized. The defense uses it to say, look, this is a happy marriage, no history of violence.
Right, like why would he suddenly snap?
Exactly. But the prosecution uses that exact same background to highlight a massive hidden deviation from that norm.
Which brings us to the timeline, because everything rests on this incredibly contested window between the evening of December 23rd and the morning of December 24th.
The timeline is literally everything in this case.
So on the 23rd, Laci goes to a salon around 5:45 p.m. Her sister cuts Scott's hair, and Scott mentions he plans to go golfing the next day, which is Christmas Eve.
That's a key detail to remember. He said golfing.
Yeah. Then later, around 8:30 p.m., Laci speaks to her mom on the phone. Scott claims they just spent the rest of the night watching the movie The Rookie and eating pizza.
Which leads right into the morning of the 24th. And this is where objective reality just completely fractures.
So Scott's story is that he last saw Laci around 9:30 a.m. He said she was wearing black maternity pants, a white shirt, and was getting ready to mop the floor and take their golden retriever, Mackenzie, for a walk.
But his own digital footprint immediately makes things messy. At 9:30 a.m., digital forensics confirm he logs into his work computer.
Right, and then less than 40 minutes later, at 10:08 a.m., he leaves a voicemail for Laci,
saying he's heading to the Berkeley Marina to fish for sturgeon.
which is a massive shift from his golfing plan. And Berkeley is what, like 90 miles away from Modesto?
Exactly 90 miles. And that distance is crucial for investigators building a timeline. They are looking for the window of opportunity.
So Scott logs off right after 9:30. The entire focus shifts to the dog, Mackenzie.
Yeah, because the dog is the only living thing that was actually there when whatever happened to Laci happened.
And this is where human memory makes everything so complicated. If you read the neighbors' accounts, it's wild.
It really is. You have Karen Service, a neighbor, who finds the dog wandering with a muddy leash attached.
Right, and she puts the dog back in the yard. Initially, she told police this was around 10:30 a.m.
But later, during the trial, when they really scrutinized her timeline, she testified definitively that it was 10:10 a.m.
Which doesn't sound like a big deal, but then another neighbor, Mike Chiavetta, claims he saw the dog running loose at 10:45 a.m.
And the mechanics of human memory explain this perfectly. I mean, on a random Tuesday morning, you aren't logging exact timestamps.
No, of course not. You just think, oh, it was after my shower or right before I left for the store.
Exactly. You anchor memories to your own fluid routine. But in a court of law, the difference between 10.18 and 10.45 is catastrophic.
Because if Karen's service is right about 10.18, and Scott logged off his computer at 9:30, the window for Lacey to mop, get ready, leave, and be abducted by some random stranger is, well, it's practically non-existent.
It's less than 45 minutes.
It's like trying to reconstruct a shattered vase when you don't even know if you have all the pieces. You're just relying on fragments of routine.
And setting the dog aside for a second, just the geography of Scott's alibi is a huge red flag.
Oh, totally. Taking a 180-mile round trip on Christmas Eve morning, leaving your heavily pregnant wife to mop floors just to fish in a boat that literally nobody in his family knew he owned.
It's a massive leap of logic, and that isolation is what trained investigators flag immediately. Going from a local golf game to a distant, solitary activity on a major holiday is a classic anomaly.
And the electronic trail confirms he went there. Cell towers ping his phone near Richmond at 10:30 a.m., and he has a marina parking receipt from Berkeley at 12:54 p.m.
He leaves another voicemail for Lacey at 2:15 p.m. saying, hey, beautiful, I'm leaving Berkeley.
He gets back to Modesto around 2:30 or 3:00 p.m. Lacey's car is there, her purse and keys are in the closet, the dog is in the yard.
And what does he do? He takes a shower, washes his clothes, and eventually calls her mom.
Right, and her stepdad reports her missing at 7 p.m. Because she's pregnant, the police don't wait the usual 24 hours. They launch a massive search immediately, helicopters, bloodhounds, the whole deal.
But while the community is out searching the parks, detectives are already looking really closely at the husband because his behavior is setting off alarms.
Yeah, they're looking at demeanor evidence. When detectives first interact with him, he's polite, but they describe him as weirdly detached, arrogant, and even irritable.
He's not demanding resources or pressing them for updates like a frantic husband normally would.
Which I find demeanor evidence so fascinating. Because everyone processes trauma differently, right? Someone in shock might act totally numb.
That's true, which is why it's subjective. But it wasn't just the detectives. Search volunteers, Lacey's own family, everyone was noticing it.
He wouldn't participate in the candlelight vigils. The police noted his house smelled strongly of bleach. And then, this is where it gets really dark, he starts making these highly specific financial moves.
Very quickly. He trades in Lacey's Land Rover for a pickup truck. He calls a realtor to ask about selling their house.
And he specifically asks if he can sell it fully furnished. Right?
Yeah. And he upgrades his cable package to add porn channels.
Which, okay, none of that is illegal.
No, not at all. If you look at it in a vacuum, a defense attorney can say, look, he's a man in denial liquidating assets to pay for a lawyer.
But in the context of an active homicide investigation, it's a deeply disturbing pattern. It's like a pointless painting.
That's a good way to put it.
One dot of paint, like selling a car, is just a dot. You can brush it off. But when you step back and look at 1,000 dots, a very clear picture of guilt emerges.
And the biggest dot of all landed on December 30th.
Right. Amber Frey.
Yes. Amber Frey, a massage therapist from Fresno, contacts the police. She tells them she'd been dating Scott since late November.
Now, cheating on your pregnant wife is horrible. But juries know that being a cheater doesn't automatically make you a murderer.
Exactly. The infidelity wasn't the smoking gun. It was a specific conversation they had on December 9th.
2 weeks before Lacey even disappeared.
Yes. On December 9th, Scott told Amber he was a widower. He said he had lost his wife, and this was going to be his first Christmas without her.
I mean, that just shifts the entire framework. It goes from a sudden crime of passion to calculated premeditation.
It gave the state the absolute hardest thing to prove in a circumstantial case: motive and intent. He was actively erasing his wife from his reality weeks before she vanished.
So the police take this extraordinary step. They get Amber Frey, who gets Gloria Allred as her attorney, to secretly record her phone calls with Scott.
And the wiretaps are just surreal.
Oh, they're insane to listen to. Scott is calling her, claiming he's in Paris for New Year's, standing near the Eiffel Tower, while police surveillance shows he's actually in Modesto.
Sometimes literally standing at the search command center for his missing wife.
The psychological manipulation is just staggering.
By using Amber, the police locked Scott into a verifiable matrix of lies. It completely destroyed any defense narrative of him being a grieving husband.
And when Amber eventually holds a press conference in late January, Lacey's family completely drops their support for Scott. The media scrutiny just explodes.
But despite all of this, the wiretaps, the widower lie, the bizarre behavior, Modesto police had a massive problem.
No crime scene, no weapon, and no body.
Trying a nobody homicide is incredibly perilous. The defense can just say, hey, she walked away or she was kidnapped, she might still be alive.
Yeah.
You can't prove cause of death without a body.
You need physical evidence to anchor all those circumstantial dots. And that anchor finally materialized in April 2003.
Exactly where Scott claimed to be fishing.
Right. The bodies washed ashore at the Point Isabel regional shoreline near the Berkeley Marina. April 13th, a couple walking their dog finds the fetus on a tidal flat.
And the next day, a jogger finds a heavily decomposed human torso in the rocks. DNA confirms it's Lacey and Connor.
Which completely neutralizes the defense's theory that Lacey was taken somewhere else by strangers.
The autopsy details are grim, but the forensic realities are so important here. Dr. Brian Peterson, no relation to Scott or Lacey, did the autopsies.
Right. Lacey's body was missing her head, most of her limbs, and internal organs. But Connor's body was remarkably intact.
And the defense tried to use that. They suggested it meant Connor was born alive after Lacey was kidnapped.
But Dr. Peterson explained the science of post-mortem fetal expulsion, right?
Yes. It's often referred to as coffin birth. When a pregnant body decomposes underwater, natural gases build up inside the abdomen. The pressure literally forces the fetus out of the uterus.
Wow.
Yeah. Dr. Peterson testified Connor died in utero. Once he was expelled into the cold seawater, his internal organs washed away, but his body stayed mostly intact compared to Lacey's.
And what about Lacey's missing head and limbs?
No tool marks or human incisions were found on the bones. The detachment is standard in aquatic decomposition. The tidal forces naturally pull the extremities away, especially if the body was weighted down at the wrists and ankles.
The discovery changes everything. April 18th, police track Scott to a golf course in La Jolla down near San Diego.
And the inventory of his car when they arrest him is crazy.
It reads like a survivalist loadout. He had dyed his hair and goatee blonde. He had his brother's ID, 15 grand in cash, camping gear, water purifiers, multiple cell phones, and Viagra.
The prosecution immediately called this consciousness of guilt. He was fleeing to Mexico.
But Mark Geragos, his defense attorney, fought that aggressively. He said Scott was fleeing the media, not the police.
Which, from a psychological standpoint, is a fair argument to present. He had reporters on his lawn and was getting death threats.
So was the 15 grand in dyed hair proof of murder, or just a desperate man having a total breakdown because his face was on every TV in America?
That's exactly what the jury had to weigh. You know, checking into a hotel under a fake name to hide from paparazzi makes sense.
But the 15 grand and the brother's ID, you don't need a fake ID to hide from reporters. You needed to cross a border.
Exactly. So the judge allowed it into evidence. Now, the 2004 trial gets moved to San Mateo County because there was no way to get an unbiased jury in Modesto.
And it becomes this massive forensic battle. Since they didn't have a confession or an exact cause of death, the prosecution leaned on three highly technical forensic pillars.
The first one being mitochondrial DNA.
Okay, can you explain the difference there? Because most people just hear DNA and think it's all the same.
Right, so nuclear DNA is what we usually hear about. It's inherited from both parents and it's unique to you, but it degrades quickly and you need the root of a hair to test it.
And they only found a hair fragment without a root, right?
Wrapped around a pair of needle-nose pliers in Scott's boat. So the FBI used mitochondrial DNA, which is found outside the nucleus and is passed down strictly through the maternal line.
So it's much tougher? It survives better?
Yes. They matched the hair on the pliers to hairs from Lacey's hairbrush. Now, it's not a one-to-one identifier. Anyone in Lacey's maternal line would have that profile.
But statistically, finding it in the brand new boat that Lacey didn't even know existed?
It was incredibly damning. The state argued the hair transferred while he was moving her body.
Okay, so that's pillar one. The second forensic pillar involved concrete.
Right. Scott admitted he bought a 90-pound bag of cement. He claimed he used some to make a single anchor for his boat and used the rest to patch his driveway.
But when crime scene techs looked at his warehouse, they found something else.
Detective Dodge Hendy found 5 distinct circular rings in the cement dust on the bed of Scott's boat trailer, and they perfectly matched the picture Scott used as a mold.
The implication being he didn't make one anchor, he made 5.
Exactly. 4 to weigh down Lacey's wrists and ankles, and 1 for the boat.
And though the defense pointed out that sonar scans of the bay floor never found any concrete anchors.
Which is true. And that leads to the third pillar, the hydrology of San Francisco Bay.
How do you even trace bodies in a massive, turbulent ocean bay over 4 months.
The state brought in Ralph Cheng from the U.S. Geological Survey. He used advanced computer modeling of the tides, wind patterns, and the underwater topography to reverse engineer the drift.
So he basically worked backward from where they were found.
Yes. Based on the coordinates where they washed ashore in April, Cheng's model showed they likely originated from the exact area where Scott admitted he was fishing on December 24th.
Wow. Giragos tried to argue tunnel vision, right? Saying police locked on to Scott because of Amber Frey and ignored everything else.
Yeah, the defense theory was that Lacey was abducted by men burglarizing a house across the street, held hostage, and then the real killers framed Scott by dumping the bodies where the media said he'd been fishing.
But the cumulative weight was just too much. November 12, 2004, the jury convicts him of first-degree murder for Lacey and second-degree for Connor.
And he's sentenced to death by lethal injection.
Which, normally you think a death sentence is the end of the story. The gavel comes down, they go to San Quentin, and that's it.
But in the American legal system, a capital conviction is really just the opening salvo in a procedural war that lasts decades.
And this is where we get into the appeals. The philosophy is to prevent executing an innocent person, right?
Exactly. But the appeals are rarely about litigating actual innocence. It's almost entirely about procedural fairness. Did the trial follow constitutional law?
Which brings us to 2020. The California Supreme Court upholds his murder conviction, saying the evidence is overwhelming, but they unanimously overturned his death sentence.
And it had nothing to do with the evidence of the crime. It was entirely about how the trial judge handled jury questionnaires.
It's the concept of death qualification, right?
Yes. If a juror is fundamentally morally opposed to the death penalty, they can't serve on a capital case because they can't follow the law.
But the judge, Judge DeLucci, made a mistake.
A critical error. He dismissed potential jurors just because their forms said they opposed the death penalty without bringing them in for a crucial follow-up question.
He didn't ask if they could set those personal feelings aside.
Exactly. You can hate the death penalty, but if you swear an oath to follow the law and impose it if the evidence demands it, you have a constitutional right to serve. By skipping that question, the judge violated Supreme Court precedent,
making the penalty phase unconstitutional. So Scott is resentenced to life without parole and moved to Mule Creek State Prison. But his lawyers aren't done. They file a habeas corpus petition.
And this is a really important distinction for non-lawyers.
Yeah. Explain the difference between a direct appeal and a habeas petition.
So a direct appeal is strictly confined to the paper record of the trial. The court just reads the transcripts to see if the judge or lawyers messed up the rules.
Okay.
But a habeas corpus petition, which means produce the body, allows the defense to bring in brand new evidence from outside the trial record, like new DNA or severe juror misconduct.
Which is what they argued here. They went after juror number 7, Rochelle Nice.
Right. They found out that on her 2004 questionnaire, she answered no when asked if she had ever been in a lawsuit or been the victim of a crime.
But she had been. In 2000, she filed for a restraining order against her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend, saying she was terrified for her unborn child because the woman was harassing her.
The defense called this a devastating omission. They argued she was a stealth juror.
Someone who intentionally lied to get on the jury to punish a man accused of killing his pregnant wife because of her own past trauma.
Judge Masulo held hearings on this in 2022. It came down to intent. Ultimately, the judge ruled she was negligent. She misunderstood the legal definitions of lawsuit and crime on a really confusing 50-page form.
But she didn't act with malice or pre-existing bias, so the petition was denied.
And this is where the public gets so frustrated with the legal system.
Oh, totally. People look at the wiretaps, the bodies in the bay, the whole mountain of evidence, and they're like, why are we threatening to overturn a murder conviction because someone checked the wrong box 20 years ago?
It feels like justice being hijacked by bureaucracy. But those rules are the only safeguard we have against state tyranny.
Because the government has limitless resources.
Exactly. The rules level the playing field. If an appellate court says, well, the judge broke the rules, but we think he's guilty, so we'll let it slide, the integrity of the whole system collapses. The rules have to apply to everyone.
But all that procedural fighting was just a warm-up for what's happening right now. In January 2024, the Los Angeles Innocence Project takes over the case.
And they are not looking for technicalities. They are hunting for actual biological innocence.
Which is a massive hurdle, right? Because post-conviction, you don't have the presumption of innocence anymore.
The court assumes the jury got it right. To win a habeas petition claiming actual innocence, You need new evidence that completely destroys the original case. Like, no reasonable jury could convict based on this new info.
So the LA Innocence Project requests DNA testing on dozens of items, leaning heavily on modern touch DNA technology.
The ability to pull a genetic profile from just a few microscopic skin cells left on an object.
They focus really hard on this burned-out orange van found near the Peterson home on Christmas Day.
Yeah, a former fire investigator named Brian Spatulski looked at a mattress from that van.
Initial tests back in the day were inconclusive, but later tests showed presumptive positive stains for human DNA.
The Innocence Project theorizes Lassie was held in that van, and modern testing could find her DNA or the DNA of a known local criminal on that mattress.
But in May 2024, the judge denied the request to test the mattress, which, why deny it if it could point to a different killer?
It's all about chain of custody and legal relevance. A judge won't authorize a fishing expedition into decades-old evidence without a logical link to the crime.
And the van was just found burning nearby, not definitively linked to Lacey.
Plus, after 20 years in storage, the risk of contamination is huge. If the chain of custody isn't perfect, any new DNA could just be a transfer from a lab tech.
Okay, but the judge didn't deny everything. She granted testing on one single item. And this brings us right back to the start of this deep dive, the duct tape.
The 15.5-inch piece of duct tape.
Why that item?
Because the duct tape was recovered directly from Lacey's remains. The medical examiner physically pulled it off her maternity pants during the autopsy. The chain of custody is solid and unbroken.
So the Innocence Project is betting that the real killer handled that tape without gloves,
leaving behind skin cells. If a lab today can pull a full DNA profile off that tape, run it through CODIS, the national database, and it matches a convicted burglar from Modesto,
the entire 2004 verdict disintegrates.
That's the goal, and they're combining this DNA request with a massive push on the old burglary theory.
Right. At trial, the timeline was that the house across the street was burglarized on December 27th, after Lacey was already gone. The Innocence Project says it actually happened on the morning of the 24th.
They're basically asking the court to look at the exact same puzzle pieces but put it together differently. They're saying Lacey confronted these burglars while walking the dog.
And they have affidavits from 11 different eyewitnesses who claim they saw Lacey walking Mackenzie after Scott had already left for Berkeley.
They argue the police willfully ignored those witnesses because it ruined their timeline against Scott.
They're also attacking the science. They say the 2004 fetal growth formulas used to date Connor's death are obsolete now.
Yeah, they're citing new biometric models that suggest Connor died past December 28th.
Which is huge, because by the 28th, Scott was under 2047 police surveillance. He physically couldn't have disposed of the bodies then.
And they're submitting new hydrodynamic modeling to challenge Ralph Cheng's title evidence.
It's just a mountain of alternate data. But as a legal observer, how do you even weigh that? You still have the Amber Frey wiretaps. You still have the widower lie.
You still have the mitochondrial DNA on the pliers, the dyed hair, the survival gear.
The appellate courts have this monumental task. They have to decide. Did the LA Innocence Project find a genuine failure of the justice system? Or is this just a really well-funded smokescreen by a guilty man 20 years later?
The burden is on the defense. They have to prove this new evidence doesn't just create doubt, but actively proves innocence.
And right now, all of that legal philosophy literally comes down to whatever a technician finds on that piece of tape. If it's Scott's DNA or no DNA, the door probably closes on this forever.
The journey of this case is just staggering. From a quiet morning in Modesto to the San Francisco Bay through the highest courts, and now it's sitting under a microscope in a lab.
And through all the legal mechanics, we have to remember the legacy of Lacey and Connor. This tragedy permanently changed federal law.
Yes. In 2004, the Unborn Victims of Violence Act was signed into law, widely known as Lacey and Connor's Law.
What exactly did that change?
It establishes that if someone causes death or injury to a child in utero during a federal violent crime, they get charged with a separate, distinct offense. It recognized the unborn child as a secondary victim.
Lacey's mother, Sharon Rocha, really advocated for that and was there when it was signed. It's a lasting legacy from just an unimaginable nightmare.
It really shows how one case can force the system to evolve, not just procedurally with DNA, but actual statutes.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to think about the context of time. We've been looking at this through the lens of 2002, but imagine the modern true crime feedback loop processing this exact same case today.
Oh, the landscape is entirely unrecognizable now.
Right. Imagine Lacey vanishes this morning. In 2002, cops relied on a neighbor maybe remembering when a dog barked. Today, every house on that street has a Ring camera.
Scott's truck would have a telemetry system logging his exact GPS, his speed, his braking patterns.
His smartphone would pinpoint his location to the square foot. The debate between 10:18 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. wouldn't exist.
Law enforcement wouldn't be guessing. They'd have a digital breadcrumb trail.
But then there's the terrifying shift in public involvement. Back then, people just watched the evening news. Today, an army of TikTok investigators and Reddit sleuths would be all over this in real time.
They'd be pulling satellite imagery, hacking digital footprints, blasting theories to millions before the police even set up a command center.
The pressure on the police to make an arrest just to satisfy the internet would be insane.
It raises a huge question about justice in the digital age.
Yeah. Would Scott have been caught unequivocally on day one with surveillance footage? Or, knowing how chaotic viral sleuthing gets, would millions of people have hyperfixated on the burglary across the street?
Or scrutinize that burned-out van on social media and relentlessly framed an innocent neighbor?
Exactly. Ruining some random person's life while the real killer just manipulated the digital noise.
It's a chilling thought. We have better tools for clarity now, but the court of public opinion is this hyper-accelerated machine that often cares more about a good narrative than actual evidence.
The technology changes, but the human element, the lies, the memories, the hunt for truth, it's all just as complex. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, keep examining the evidence and never lose sight of the people at the center of the story.
Because as we've seen today, the line between a lifetime in prison and exoneration might just be measured in a few microscopic cells on a 15.5-inch piece of duct tape.